Hello everyone! Today we will be exploring one of the greatest epic poems of ancient Greece, the Iliad by Homer, which recounts the dramatic final weeks of the Trojan War. Set in the Bronze Age, the poem is a powerful exploration of heroism, pride, fate, and the wrath of Achilles. While the war between the Greeks, Achaeans, and Trojans is the backdrop, the Iliad focuses more on the internal conflicts between its greatest warriors, particularly Achilles and Agamemnon, and the tragic consequences of their choices. The gods intervene frequently, manipulating events and shaping the destinies of mortals, while the themes of honor, glory, and mortality remain central throughout the epic. Book 1. The Quarrel by the Ships. The epic begins with the wrath of Achilles. The Greek army, led by King Agamemnon, has been suffering from a devastating plague sent by Apollo. This divine punishment comes after Agamemnon refuses to return Chryseis, a captive woman, to her father, Chryses, a priest of Apollo. The Greek prophet Calchas reveals that the only way to appease Apollo is for Agamemnon to return Chryseis without ransom. Agamemnon agrees, but, in an act of pride and arrogance, demands compensation in return. This enrages Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, who feels dishonored by Agamemnon's greed. Their quarrel escalates, and Achilles nearly kills Agamemnon, but Athena intervenes, urging him to control his anger. Instead of fighting, Achilles withdraws from battle and asks his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, to persuade Zeus to punish the Greeks. Zeus reluctantly agrees, setting the stage for the suffering that follows. Book 2. Agamemnon's Dream and the Catalogue of Ships. Zeus, in response to Thetis's plea, sends Agamemnon a deceptive dream, making him believe that the Greeks will be victorious if they attack Troy immediately. Excited by this vision, Agamemnon gathers his forces but decides to test their loyalty first by telling them they can go home. To his surprise, the soldiers eagerly rush to the ships, eager to end the war. Odysseus, with Athena's help, restores order and reminds them of their duty. Nestor, an elder statesman, encourages Agamemnon to lead them into battle. The book then presents the catalogue of ships, a grand list detailing the Greek forces, their leaders, and the regions they came from. This passage serves to emphasize the vast scale of the war and the unity of the Greek armies. Book 3. Paris, Menelaus, and Helen. The battle is temporarily paused as Paris, the Trojan prince who started the war by abducting Helen, offers to duel Menelaus, Helen's former husband, to determine the war's outcome. Paris, however, is cowardly and reluctant, but his brother Hector shames him into fighting. The duel begins, and Menelaus quickly gains the upper hand. Just as Menelaus is about to deliver the killing blow, Aphrodite intervenes, saving Paris by whisking him away to his chambers. Helen, disgusted with Paris's weakness, reluctantly joins him. Meanwhile, the Greeks demand that Troy surrender, believing that Menelaus has won the duel, but the gods have other plans. Book 4. The armies clash. Zeus debates with the other gods about whether the war should end with the duel or continue. Athena, who favors the Greeks, tricks a Trojan archer, Pandarus, into breaking the truce by shooting an arrow at Menelaus, wounding him. Outraged, the Greeks rally for battle, and the full-scale war resumes. The battlefield erupts into chaos as warriors on both sides engage in brutal combat. Bloodshed and death mark the day as both armies fight fiercely, each side seeking to claim victory and honor. Book 5. Diomedes Goes to Battle. Diomedes, a Greek warrior, emerges as a dominant force on the battlefield, slaughtering numerous Trojans with the favor of Athena. In a remarkable moment, Diomedes wounds both Aphrodite and Ares, two gods who interfere on behalf of the Trojans. Aphrodite, attempting to protect her son Aeneas, is injured and flees in pain. Ares, the god of war, joins the battle but is also wounded and retreats to Olympus. This book highlights the intervention of the gods and the exceptional prowess of mortal warriors. Diomedes' bravery and skill establish him as a powerful force among the Greeks, showing that even divine beings can be challenged by human might. Book 6. Hector and Andromache. Amidst the chaos, Hector, the noble Trojan prince, returns to the city of Troy to visit his family. He urges the women and elders to pray to Athena for protection, but he knows that fate is inevitable. He then meets his wife, Andromache, and their infant son, Astyanax. Andromache pleads with him to stay, fearing he will die in battle and leave their son fatherless. However, Hector, bound by duty and honor, insists that he must fight for Troy, even though he knows his fate is sealed. Their farewell is deeply emotional, and Hector's love for his family contrasts with his sense of obligation to his people. This scene is one of the most poignant moments in the Iliad, highlighting the human cost of war. Book 7. Hector and Ajax. To settle the ongoing bloodshed, Hector issues a challenge to any Greek warrior willing to face him in single combat. Several hesitate, but Ajax, the towering warrior of the Greeks, steps forward. Their duel is intense and evenly matched, with neither warrior able to gain a decisive victory. As night falls, they agree to a truce out of mutual respect, exchanging gifts as a sign of honor. This encounter emphasizes the warrior code, where even enemies can acknowledge each other's strength and bravery. Despite their enmity, there is a shared understanding of the burdens of war. Book 8. The Trojans have success. As the battle rages on, Zeus takes a firm stance and forbids the gods from interfering. He promises Hector that Troy will have the upper hand for the day, and as a result, the Trojans push the Greeks back toward their ships. Hector becomes the dominant force on the battlefield, slaughtering Greek warriors and inspiring his troops with his seemingly unstoppable might. The Achaeans suffer heavy losses, and the morale of the army plummets as they realize they cannot fight against Zeus's will. As night falls, the Trojans set up camp just outside the Greek fortifications, ready to deliver a final blow at dawn. This marks a significant turning point, as the Greeks find themselves in their most vulnerable position since the war began. Book 9. Peace Offerings to Achilles. Recognizing the dire situation, Agamemnon finally acknowledges his mistake in dishonoring Achilles. He decides to send an embassy of Odysseus, Phoenix, and Ajax to offer Achilles lavish gifts, including the return of Briseis, in hopes of convincing him to return to battle. The envoys appeal to Achilles' pride, honor, and responsibility to his fellow warriors, but Achilles remains unmoved. He declares that no amount of treasure can compensate for the insult he endured, and that he is prepared to leave Troy entirely. Phoenix, his old mentor, tries to persuade him by recounting the story of another warrior who once rejected gifts and later regretted it, but Achilles is resolute. This moment is crucial because it highlights Achilles' internal struggle. His rage and wounded pride outweigh even his duty to his comrades, setting the stage for greater tragedy. Book 10. A Night Raid. With Achilles still refusing to fight, the Greeks must find another way to shift the momentum. Odysseus and Diomedes undertake a dangerous night raid to gather intelligence on the Trojan camp. As they move through the battlefield, they encounter Dolon, a Trojan spy sent to scout the Greek forces. They capture and interrogate him, extracting valuable information about the Trojans' positions before executing him. Using the intelligence they gained, they infiltrate the Trojan camp, killing several key warriors and stealing horses. This daring mission provides the Greeks with some advantage, but it does little to change their overall desperation. The night raid demonstrates the role of cunning and strategy in war, showing that brute strength alone is not always the key to victory. Book 11. The Achaeans face disaster. The following day, battle resumes with renewed intensity. Agamemnon leads the charge, fighting bravely and killing many Trojans. However, Zeus intervenes again, shifting the battle in Hector's favor. The Trojan prince wounds Agamemnon, forcing him to retreat. One by one, Key Greek warriors Diomedes, Odysseus, and even Ajax are wounded, leaving the Achaean forces in disarray. Hector capitalizes on their weakened state, pushing them back toward their ships. The Greek defenses begin to collapse, and the realization sets in that without Achilles, their situation is almost hopeless. This chapter builds suspense, reinforcing the theme that pride and division among the Greeks have led them to the brink of destruction. Book 12. The Fight at the Barricade. The Trojans continue their relentless assault, reaching the Greek fortifications. Hector, driven by his growing confidence and Zeus's favor, urges his troops forward. The Greeks put up a fierce resistance, but ultimately the Trojans manage to breach the barricade. The scene is one of sheer chaos as warriors clash in brutal combat. The Greeks are now dangerously close to losing their ships, which would spell complete defeat. This chapter highlights the vulnerability of the Greeks, showing how the absence of Achilles has tilted the war in Troy's favor. Book 13. The Trojans attack the ships. Despite Zeus's decree that no god should interfere, Poseidon defies him and secretly aids the Greeks. He inspires the warriors to fight back, particularly the mighty Ajax, who becomes a key defender of the ships. The fighting reaches its most intense point, with the Greeks desperate to hold their ground. Hector remains a dominant force, slashing through the Greek ranks and nearly setting fire to the ships. The battle at the ships is a turning point. If the Trojans succeed, the war will end in their favor. The divine interventions in this chapter underscore the ongoing struggle between fate and free will in the conflict. Book 14. Zeus Deceived. Hera, recognizing that Zeus's favor toward the Trojans is dooming the Greeks, devises a cunning plan to distract him. She seduces Zeus on Mount Ida, lulling him into a deep sleep. With Zeus incapacitated, Poseidon openly joins the Greeks, helping them push back against the Trojan onslaught. This divine trickery temporarily shifts the battle, giving the Greeks a much-needed reprieve. However, the deception is only a temporary measure, as the will of Zeus ultimately determines the fate of the war. This episode reveals the extent to which the gods manipulate human affairs, using both direct and indirect means to influence events. Book 15. Battle at the Ships. Zeus awakens. Furious at Hera's trickery, he reasserts his dominance and commands Poseidon to withdraw from the battle. With the gods once again favoring the Trojans, Hector leads a renewed assault on the Greek ships. The Greek forces are pushed to their limit, and it seems inevitable that their fleet will be destroyed. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, witnesses the devastation and is deeply troubled. He pleads with Achilles to allow him to enter the battle, wearing Achilles' armor, hoping to inspire the Greeks and turn the tide. Achilles, still refusing to fight himself, grants permission, but warns Patroclus not to pursue the Trojans too far. Book 16. Patroclus fights and dies. Patroclus enters battle in Achilles' armor, and the Greeks rally behind him, believing Achilles has returned. He fights bravely, pushing the Trojans back and even killing Sarpedon, Zeus's mortal son. Encouraged by his success, Patroclus ignores Achilles' warning and continues his assault, eventually reaching the gates of Troy. However, Hector confronts him, and after a fierce duel, Patroclus is struck down by Hector's spear. As he dies, he foretells Hector's own fate, warning him that Achilles will avenge him. Patroclus' death is the emotional and narrative turning point of the Iliad, as it finally forces Achilles to return to battle, setting the stage for the poem's climax. Book 17. The Fight over Patroclus. With Patroclus slain by Hector, a fierce struggle erupts over his body. The Greeks desperately try to recover the fallen warrior's corpse, while the Trojans seek to claim it as a symbol of their victory. Menelaus, fiercely protective of Patroclus, engages Hector, but the Trojan hero receives divine assistance from Apollo, tipping the balance in his favor. Meanwhile, Aeneas and Hector lead the Trojan charge, determined to strip Patroclus of Achilles' armor and disgrace him in death. The battle sways back and forth, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Eventually, the Greeks, with the help of Ajax and Menelaus, managed to retrieve Patroclus's body, but the loss weighs heavily on the Achaean army. Book 18, The Arms of Achilles. News of Patroclus's death reaches Achilles, sending him into a state of uncontrollable grief. He is overcome with rage and vows to avenge his fallen companion, even though he knows that his own death will follow soon after. His mother, Thetis, warns him of this fate, but still agrees to seek new armor from Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith. Hephaestus forges magnificent armor for Achilles, including an intricately designed shield that represents the full scope of human existence, war, peace, harvest, festivals, and cosmic order. This shield serves as a symbolic contrast to Achilles' destructive wrath, reminding the reader of what is lost in war. As Achilles prepares for battle, his return signals a shift in the war, and both Greeks and Trojans recognize that bloodshed will only intensify. Book 19, Achilles and Agamemnon. Before returning to battle, Achilles finally reconciles with Agamemnon. Agamemnon, acknowledging his previous mistakes, offers Achilles gifts, including the return of Briseis, as a way to mend their fractured alliance. However, Achilles is indifferent to material wealth. His only concern is avenging Patroclus. Despite Odysseus' suggestion that he should eat and regain his strength before fighting, Achilles refuses, consumed by rage. His refusal to take care of his own well-being highlights his growing detachment from life itself as he moves toward an inevitable fate. The scene marks a transformation in Achilles, from a man who once valued honor and recognition to one who cares only for vengeance, foreshadowing his actions in the coming battle. Book 20, Achilles returns to battle. Zeus, allowing the gods to re-enter the fray, watches as Achilles storms the battlefield like an unstoppable force. He cuts down Trojan warriors mercilessly, striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. Even Aeneas, favored by the gods, barely escapes death thanks to Poseidon's intervention. Achilles' bloodlust is all-consuming. He fights without restraint, turning the tide of the war back in the Greeks' favor. The gods themselves begin to take sides more openly, with Apollo aiding the Trojans and Athena and Hera supporting Achilles. The chapter marks Achilles' transformation into a near-divine warrior, a force of pure destruction driven by grief and fury. Book 21, Achilles fights the river. Achilles continues his rampage, slaughtering so many Trojans that their bodies clog the river Scamander. The river god, angered by the pollution of his waters, rises against Achilles, nearly drowning him in a powerful flood. Achilles fights desperately, but it is only with the intervention of Hephaestus, who sends flames to counter the river's wrath, that he is able to escape. This battle emphasizes the overwhelming destruction Achilles brings, not only to humans, but to nature itself. It also serves as a reminder that even the mightiest warrior can be humbled by forces beyond his control. However, Achilles remains undeterred, ready to face Hector and exact his final revenge. Book 22, The Death of Hector. As the Trojans retreat behind their walls, Hector alone remains outside, waiting to face Achilles. However, as Achilles approaches, Hector's courage wavers, and he flees in terror. Achilles chases him around the walls of Troy 3 times before Hector, tricked by Athena, finally stops to fight. Knowing that his death is near, Hector requests that Achilles return his body to the Trojans for a proper burial. Achilles refuses, still burning with rage, and swiftly kills Hector with a precise strike to the neck. In an act of cruelty, he ties Hector's body to his chariot and drags it around the walls of Troy, denying him the honor of a respectful funeral. This moment is the peak of Achilles' wrath, but it also foreshadows his eventual downfall. Hector's death marks the turning point of the war. Without their greatest hero, Troy's fate is sealed. Book 23, The Funeral Games for Patroclus. Following Hector's death, Achilles finally holds a grand funeral for Patroclus, offering sacrifices, including Trojan captives, to honor his fallen companion. He organizes a series of athletic games in his memory, showcasing the warrior code of competition, excellence, and respect. However, Achilles remains consumed by grief, unable to find peace even after avenging Patroclus. He continues to abuse Hector's body, dragging it around the Greek camp each day. The funeral games serve as a brief respite from the horrors of war, but they also highlight Achilles' internal struggle. He has achieved his vengeance, yet it has brought him no satisfaction. This chapter also emphasizes the Greek values of honor and remembrance, as warriors seek to ensure that the dead are properly commemorated. Book 24, Achilles and Priam. In one of the most powerful scenes of the Iliad, Priam, the aged king of Troy, bravely enters the Greek camp at night to plead for the return of his son's body. Guided by Hermes, Priam falls at Achilles' feet and begs him to show mercy. He appeals to Achilles' own father Peleus, reminding him that all men, warriors and kings alike, must face death. Moved by Priam's grief, Achilles finally lets go of his wrath. He returns Hector's body, allowing the Trojans to conduct a proper funeral. This moment of reconciliation is deeply human, showing Achilles as more than just a warrior. He is a man who can still feel compassion, even for his greatest enemy. The poem ends not with the fall of Troy, but with Hector's funeral, emphasizing that even in war, honor and respect for the dead endure. Conclusion: Homer's The Iliad is a masterful exploration of rage, honor, mortality, and the tragic nature of war. Achilles' transformation from an arrogant warrior to an avenger consumed by grief, and finally to a man capable of mercy, is central to the epic's message. The final books highlight the cost of unchecked vengeance, the inevitability of fate, and the fleeting nature of glory. Hector's death seals Troy's doom, but it is Achilles' act of compassion that ultimately gives the poem its emotional weight. The Iliad reminds us that even in the brutality of war, moments of humanity and reconciliation can shine through.